Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to wyomingpbs.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
Many Wyoming communities deal with the issue of blight, dilapidated structures, both residential and commercial, that are eyesores in the community. The same's true here in Cheyenne. We'll visit with Cheyenne's Mayor, Marian Orr, on how she plans to deal with the issue of blight, and we'll discuss other issues about Cheyenne. Next on Wyoming Chronicle.
Funding for Wyoming Chronicle is provided in part by the Dragisevich Foundation, supporting the work of the Wyoming Community Foundation.
And it's our pleasure now to be joined by the first female mayor of the city of Cheyenne, Mayor Marian Orr. Welcome to Wyoming Chronicle, Mayor.
Thank you.
We haven't had a mayor on the show for quite a while, Madam Mayor, so it's nice to visit with you this morning.
Well, I'm honored.
We're going to talk about a lot of things that have to do with Cheyenne. But to start with, our viewers right now are looking at blight here in the community. It's a project that has risen to the top of your list on things to deal with, and you've been somewhat aggressive in how you want to deal with blight here in Cheyenne. Why is that so important to you? It's a problem that's been around for decades.
Absolutely. It was brought to my attention actually during my campaign. My campaign was very social media driven, Facebook driven, and somebody reached out to me actually not a few blocks away from here at City Hall, and they were living across the alley from a home that had been abandoned for several years and had fallen beyond disrepair, but there was actually probably about 8 feet worth of empty dirt essentially underneath this shed, and skunks were being attracted to it, and I learned very quickly the phrase attractive nuisance, and that even a kid walking down the alley might think that that was a pretty cool place to hide out, and so I really
minus the
skunks, but it really started to open my eyes around town with blight, and so I started this Fight the Blight initiative, and the first week that I came into office, appointed a task force, and we kind of really went around town, worked with our community service officers within the police department to identify buildings that are abandoned versus maybe just somebody with yard gnomes that somebody might think is blight, but really abandoned homes that are really quite dangerous.
You found some homes that maybe fit the description of blight that people were actually living in.
Yeah. And that has been a real issue, certainly with not only our community, but communities across the nation. And one of the areas that was really targeted as far as being top of the list that we really needed to take care of is a trailer court on our south end of town. And when I originally started the task force and was campaigning, 4 of the trailers had been abandoned and shuttered up. They were boarded up. And for whatever reasons, the property owner decided that maybe unboarding them and allowing individuals to move in was better than their current situation of living in the streets. And so we ended up in a situation where we had people living in essentially mobile homes that aren't, I wouldn't even call it a mobile home, but they didn't have running water, electricity, basic services hooked up to them. So it really became a conversation that really grew much larger than what I had obviously really anticipated.
And around the first of the year, there was some tension between moving these people to we don't know where,
right,
or letting them stay. How did you deal with that?
Absolutely. Our community service providers are wonderful and certainly maxed out in our community. And it was around the first of the year. Actually, it was even worse than that. It was around Christmas time. Thanksgiving, Christmas time, brutally cold, as everybody here in Wyoming knows. And we were in a situation where, from a health, safety, public welfare point of view, and that's what the role of government is, these conditions were not safe. My biggest fear, and we had this situation, one of the tenants was actually building a fire within the unit itself. And you can imagine embers and flames in a 60-mile-an-hour evening, I mean, you know, that part could have easily gone up in flames and been really tragic. So we really had to work with the community service providers as far as communicating to the individuals living there that they weren't in a safe housing situation. And they most of them tended to find other family or friends in other states and moved along. And since then, the property owner has now boarded up, and I believe they're in the condemnation stages for those.
Has it been a struggle, though, for this? These are private property issues at times, for the city to deal with these types of issues?
They are, and that, you know, we certainly in Wyoming value private property rights. You know, I do too, but when we have situations where people are being charged rent and for services, and they're not up to code. There's a reason we have codes, I have learned, and that is for the public health and safety of our citizens. And we need to make sure that everybody's abiding by the law.
Two more things about blight, and then we'll talk about other things. Cheyenne, you initiated the Fight the Blight Committee that gave you recommendations. Where is that process today?
They came up with some really great recommendations as well as a list of properties. And so right now where it's at is they gave us our marching orders and we are moving forward. And what I've learned, unfortunately in government, it takes a lot longer to kind of get things done, and money. And these properties, many of them have contaminants, asbestos abatement issues, and again, just the due process as far as contacting the property owner and working with them to essentially remediate, or in one case on Capitol Avenue, we're working with a contractor to basically tear it down.
So at the end of your first term, 2 years from now, where do you project you'll be relative to the blight issue?
Well, my goal is to have at least the top 3 property offenders within the community, to have those abated, as well as the area that was the former hitching post site. For anybody that's ever been in Cheyenne, especially during a legislative session, that area of town just west of here, we've been working with the property owners since I took office, and we are hopefully moving forward to be able to have that area scraped for redevelopment.
We'll move on to some other topics, but they're somewhat related as we begin. Cheyenne's homeless problem and lack of affordable housing. That's also become an issue for your administration.
Absolutely. Our homeless situation is kind of twofold, and it's very complicated as it is with any community, but being on the corridor of both I-80 and I-25, we really do get a lot of transient homeless individuals that come through. And then we also have families that have really just taken really hard times. And so we have one provider, the Kamea Shelter, who does a fantastic job. They actually have really kind of expanded their services, where now they are essentially allowing somebody who might still be active in their addiction, as long as they're not creating problems for the other residents, to be able to stay there, and that's a new change. And then we have Family Promise, and they work with individuals and other community service providers in the community to house families.
What's the city's fiscal responsibility in addressing the homeless issue? You're preparing now your second budget.
Right.
Where does that fit? Where do these social pressures fit in your administration?
Within our budget, we really have a partnership with United Way here in town, and I'll be honest, at first I wasn't really sure that was a good place for taxpayer funds, but in going through and digging in deeper, what I realized is United Way is the perfect organization, if you will, to kind of vet the numerous human service agencies throughout our community. And so through that process, Kamea Shelter does receive a few tens of thousands of dollars, not much at all in their overall scheme of things. Probably not. I think everybody would argue not enough. But our role, I believe, is not necessarily to come in and pay for those services necessarily, but to work with work with the other community service providers and do whatever we can to assist their efforts. somewhat seemingly joke that I can't have a fundraiser or a gala or a ball to raise money for roads. But yeah, I certainly do support when the Kamea Shelter or Boys and Girls Club have a big event and support private donorship.
You campaigned when you were running for mayor on needs versus wants.
Right.
We've got to focus on needs, and we can't do all the wants.
Yeah.
Has those lines blurred now for you, now that you've been in this chair for a couple of years?
I think that I think it's almost more strengthened, in fact, especially in looking at the budget, because what I have really seen is that in the past we have not budgeted to take care of things that we have, things that we own. This building,
Sinking funds, if you will, right?
Right, exactly. And I'm realizing how expensive it is to maintain roads, how expensive it is to maintain stormwater, sewer, drainage systems. And just in talking with Community Parks and Recreation just yesterday, we're really excited about the idea of having essentially a 100-year park, a new park on the east side of town. But we scratch our heads on how are we going to
Saddle Ridge area,
maintain it,
right?
Right. Yeah, the east part of town. How do we maintain it? How do we have the staff to take care of it? How do we have just the basic needs to take care of it?
Some would argue that's a basic function of city government. You need to get it done.
Absolutely. And my hope is that with growth, that usually brings in additional sales and use tax revenue. So I'm hoping that essentially they'll pay for themselves.
And before we get into a little more budget, back to affordable housing. The issue that's been talked about for the last year, maybe more so, is folks at F.E. Warren Air Force Base who can't find places to live in Cheyenne.
Right.
And indeed are living in northern Colorado, traveling to Cheyenne every day.
Yeah.
What's your administration trying to do to assist?
Well, people might be surprised that we have as many as 400 to 500 individuals that cross the border back and forth with our airmen working here but living in Colorado. And what we have been doing is partnering with the Chamber of Commerce and Leeds. And we are—
That's Cheyenne's Economic Development Group.
Correct. They are. They're our economic wing, and Dale Steenbergen with the Chamber has really been in great discussions with now retired General Rand and F.E. Warren to develop what is going to be called an enhanced use lease area. It's about a 72-acre area just off the interstate right now. It's known as the Park and Ride.
Yeah, Wyomingites might know that as the Park and Ride to Frontier
Park and
Days.
Rides for Frontier Days. It will no
Which is a
longer
great
be the
service,
Park and
by the
Ride.
way.
I know, so it's going to be moved further south of town. But what we are doing is we are working to develop housing and commercial development on that area. And how that becomes affordable is the base still owns the land, so there aren't property taxes associated with the cost of that housing. So housing will indeed be affordable not only for military, but civilians will be able to be, access that housing as well.
While we're on the subject of northern Colorado, there's a competition here between Cheyenne and Fort Collins and economic development here in the city versus employees who are living not just at the Air Force Base, but
Right.
in engineers who come and support manufacturers, et cetera, that come up here every day. What is it that Fort Collins has that Cheyenne doesn't that's high on your list?
Well, what Cheyenne has that Fort Collins doesn't is wind, and I can't do much about that. I would love to, but I believe that Fort Collins, certainly it can't be argued, they have a much more attractive scene, if you will, for young professionals. And that's because they've got a campus right there, a university campus. So there are some things that we just can't, and maybe we don't necessarily want to emulate, but what it has done is create wonderful dialogue and conversation. I took the opportunity shortly after being elected mayor, I asked to meet with the mayors for the communities along the Front Range. And we talked about shared workforce. We talked about our transportation needs along I-25. And we talked not only about I-25, but also high-speed rail and air service.
Air service, nice segue.
Yeah.
Cheyenne lost its air service.
We did.
Somewhat of a surprise to some, not a surprise to others.
Correct.
The Great Lakes Airlines removed their once weekly flight.
Yeah.
But that puts TSA at risk now, and some I think would question, why does Cheyenne need air service when DIA is 90 minutes away?
Right.
Is that important for you?
Absolutely, it's important for me, and I'm actually a convert to that. I wasn't sure, having been in big cities before, a 90-minute drive is nothing if you're in LA or New York, but we are the capital city of the state of Wyoming, and I believe that essential air service is absolutely critical for our economic development. We've got businesses that
I want to
Yeah.
ask you about that, because I agree with that in other parts of Wyoming that would connect to Denver and to get service quickly. But the flights that you're considering now aren't necessarily to Denver to be connector flights that might support economic development. One is just to Las Vegas, for example, with Allegiant Air. So where is that economic connection with air service in Cheyenne so close to DIA?
I believe that the greatest economic partnership would be, regarding economic development, would be a flight to Dallas-Fort Worth, which we are really considering. We've had one before, and we're looking at possibly recruiting that again. Regarding
Is that to support oil and gas?
Right, correct, to support oil and gas as well as our military, because you can, and federal government. I mean, we are a government town between F.E. Warren and federal offices here. Our state offices obviously have to go to D.C., so a Dallas-Fort Worth connection then onto Dulles or Reagan makes a lot of sense. And that's one of the things, if I could prioritize a top flight choice, that would be mine. But to kind of get things going, Allegiant Air was very successful in the Fort Collins Loveland Airport, and they no longer have a working tower. And so Allegiant no longer flies there. And I believe, and I would love to see kind of a reverse migration with folks from the Front Range coming to Cheyenne and using our airport for their leisure services, to that flight to Las Vegas and staying and using our airport.
Downtown, we talked a little bit about Fort Collins. We've talked about millennials. Mm-hmm. People want things downtown.
Right.
You've are very active in efforts and supportive of efforts, but it's a struggle to make downtown Cheyenne, I think, what you might want to envision.
It is, and this is, again, it comes down to what's the role of government. And when we've got private property owners and vacant buildings.
Some are on the blight list, by the way.
They are, and what we have really realized is that the way that government can help is to get out of the way. And what that means for us is working with property owners to maybe lessen building fees if they have to go in and do remodels. Maybe allow for more incremental upgrades instead of, gosh, you've got to, upgrade your building and it all has to be up to code before you can open the doors, possibly letting you do so incrementally.
You have talked a little bit about tourism. You want to make sure that Cheyenne is known for just more than 2 weeks in July, Frontier Days.
Right.
What are your efforts relative to making Cheyenne more of a year-round tourist destination?
We've been working really closely with Visit Cheyenne, which is our tourism sector. They're our tourism development office here, as well as the chamber. And really what we're finding, especially with millennials and even retirees, are people really wanting outdoor experiences. And Cheyenne is really fortunate in that we're so close to fantastic, world-class mountain biking and hiking and fishing and trails. And then we're really excited eventually down the line to have the missile silo, Quebec 1, opened up as far as tourism too, where hopefully we can get people to stop off in Cheyenne. But we have a really great outdoor music scene, especially in the summer, that's great. Our Fridays on the Plaza is wildly popular, and I really hope that we are seen as much more of the arts and cultural entertainment kind of center that we are really growing to become.
Cheyenne able to attract the physicians and the healthcare experts, if you will, that it needs?
I believe we can always do better, but I can tell you the young professional doctors and their families that I've met are fantastic, and I'm really excited that the ones that I have met love Cheyenne and really want to stay. I have good friends that went through that WWAMI program, and actually my current personal physician is with UW Family Health, and I tell you what, he loves Cheyenne, and he's essentially a young millennial, and he wants to be here. And I keep telling him, you let me know anytime something isn't right with you and Cheyenne, because we have to keep him and folks like him here, and he wants to stay.
Mayor, along the same lines of attracting professionals to the community, you need professionals in tech, you need professionals with logistics, and from many, many different sectors. Has Cheyenne been able to attract the professionals it needs from your perspective?
I believe we are, and I think we're doing a better job than we have in the past. And what's keeping them here is our quality of life. I think that being so close to, again, wonderful, outdoor recreation opportunities. I had the opportunity a couple nights ago. We had one of our broadband in the ballroom summits, and I kind of felt like the old lady in the room with all these, millennial hipsters. And I thought, wow, what a eclectic, wonderful group of young professionals. And what I love is they network, they know each other, they have house parties and get together and have great conversations and
I'm thinking of the movie Game Night in my mind, by the way.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Without maybe the twists and turns.
Without the twists and turns, but it was really encouraging for me to see. And I'll be honest, during the conversation, I just kind of sat back and took it all in. Progressive, wonderful place downtown, and professionals, young professionals, and wow, it was exciting to see.
1 gigabit internet, which is, for our viewers, maybe 10 times faster downloading, maybe 100 times faster uploading. Why is that important to business?
That means the transactions and the conversation can happen instantaneously, and that's what they expect. They expect that either financial transaction or that communication, two-way if they're doing business in another country, to be able to happen instantaneously. And it's available in other communities. It's available to the south of us, and those are our competitors, and we need to be competitive, and I believe it's very possible to have that here.
If you were to tell me what the biggest barriers that you see relative to growth are in Cheyenne, and we've talked maybe about some of them, but is Cheyenne growing at the right pace? Can it grow faster? Should it grow faster? Or are there really barriers that are, other than the wind, that are a challenge for you?
I would say that the challenge for growth, not only in Cheyenne but for Wyoming, is our tax structure.
Now, you have to step back from that a little bit,
right?
Because everyone says we're at the top of the tax list. I've got no income tax. You're not going to tax my business. We're on Main Street, on Easy Street here with taxes,
Right, unless I need to build a new fire station. And how do I do that? How do I find the funds to help us grow? How do I find the funds to have additional snowplows out on the road? That's the challenge for growth. What I'm really pleased with Cheyenne and our Planning and Development Department in Laramie County is that we're planning for growth, and we're trying to do so really responsibly. I read a great article not too long ago where Fort Collins grew so fast that it's almost problematic. And if you drive through that community, you can see it. And Bozeman, Montana is possibly experiencing that kind of boom. And so I think it's coming. I think that growth is coming, and I think we need to plan for it.
So you would argue that a diversified tax structure has to be at the top of the conversation?
Absolutely, it does.
And I think you have a legislature that doesn't want to hear that.
I do.
So where's the mesh there?
We have a legislature, and I don't blame them at all. I'm very, anti-additional tax. But the taxes that we do have, I argued during the last legislative interim that as far as a mayor, I would like to have greater capability to use the tax structure that we have in a way that works for us. For instance, should we decide that we need an additional 1/4 cent for, say, air service for economic development, or say we want to get into some kind of private partnership with broadband, how do we pay for that?
A municipal-only tax.
Municipal-only tax. I can't do that. I have to go to the county and get the blessing of at least 3 out of the other 5.
The Pine Bluffs folks.
The Pine Bluffs, the Albans, and they don't see necessarily the need for Cheyenne. And so that's really that's a hard conversation. But I think in talking with some legislators, I think we're going to hear that conversation again.
Mayor, when we look down the street at the Wyoming legislature, though, there are fewer women. In fact, Wyoming is at the bottom of the list of women who are able to serve. Is that a systemic issue in state government? Why is that?
I think that, well, first of all, it's sad. I do think that we need more women in government, and I know, at least for what I can do for my part, I try to encourage women to run for office. Sometimes it's a matter of timing. I know that it was for me. This job is so incredibly time-consuming because we've got a strong mayor form of government. We don't have a city manager. Both of my kids now are at the University of Wyoming, and so I cannot imagine having this role and then raising two kids, getting them to practice, and oh my goodness, having dinner made or something like that. So in relationships with families where there's a good partnership between the men and women, I think that's great, but we also have a lot of single parent households. And I think it's really hard for women to see themselves in leadership roles like that, but I certainly encourage it.
Do you see that changing in state government?
I do see it changing, and I think because it's happening nationally, it's my understanding we've got more women running for Congress than we ever have, which is exciting, and I really hope that we start to see that in state government too.
Mayor, we have just a little bit of time left. You've been in office now, this is your second year in office.
Mm-hmm.
Any mulligans, any do-overs that you want to try to correct here in the short term?
Boy, do-overs. Fortunately, there haven't been too many missteps that have been that large. I think probably the biggest hurdle, if you will, and the biggest challenge is how to communicate with council, how to provide them with enough information and enough communication so that we're up there on the dais together, we're working together, and that's probably been the biggest challenge that I certainly have faced. But aside from the biggest mulligan, I'm really just tickled about our Bloomberg Award and something so neat for this community that Cheyenne be recognized.
And it's a competition.
It is.
There's more room to go. Talk about that for just a moment.
Well, shortly after taking office, I received an email about a mayor's competition with mayors essentially trying to throw out innovative ideas to solve local problems. And I threw out my fight, the blight.
The blight issue, sure.
The blight issue. And Cheyenne was selected from over 500 cities. We are one of 35 communities now that are competing for a multi-million-dollar award.
Well, best wishes, Mayor.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, it's been a pleasure for us to have you take time to visit with us today on Wyoming Chronicle. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Craig.